Hello, folks. Welcome to the second episode of Are Video Game Movies Good, actually?
Last week we decided yes.
Yes, we did, and we were discussing the latest Mortal Kombat movie.
Yep, Mortal Kombat 21, which I think we gave a relatively decent review to, actually.
This week we are discussing 2002's Resident Evil. And oh boy, is this a film made in 2002.
It very much is, yes. I know we've got differing opinions of our rewatch of this.
I remember this being like, when people are like, oh, video game movies are bad, I would always be like, Resident Evil isn't bad. It's alright. It's not great, but it's alright. And I left this thinking like, it's certainly not great, it's alright.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head, though, with it being a film made in 2002.
Oh, yeah.
Because actually,
so much so.
For 2002 sensibilities, I think it was as perfect a Resident Evil film as you were going to get.
This is still that era like, hey, you over there. You like The Matrix, right? Well, how about The Matrix with zombies? Based on a video game about zombies. And here's some industrial metal.
Yeah, loads of industrial metal. I remember because I rewatched it before you did, and it was one of the things I messaged you. Wasn't it? It was like, just prepare yourself for some industrial metal.
I mean, it's the same thing as like, and again, with the industrial metal stuff, you can't be left like, Blade did it better. Like, because again,
well, I mean, the thing was that Blade didn't do industrial metal. Blade did, if anything, dark house music.
But I feel it's all going for.
I know what you mean. It was well, I mean, like Blade. At least Blade 1 had music that was probably suitable for that era, but for the underground in Europe. Whereas Blade 2 changed it a little bit, and Blade 3 obviously jumped straight to hip hop. Whereas obviously Resident Evil was more kind of what was going on in the States.
Because this would have been a similar time to Underworld as well, right?
It certainly was a similar time to Underworld, which, obviously you've got another feel to that as well. The Underworld films being somewhat... they certainly have that slightly more British feel, or European feel to them anyway. I mean, understandably, they're made predominantly more in Europe, I believe so. And they've also got similar, like, longevity of lifespan as far as the season, like the how many films there are. Like the last Underworld only came out last year, I think. It was on Netflix. I think it was a Netflix release. Still on there now.
No. The last Underworld came out a few years ago.
Was it?
Yeah, and it was a cinema release. It wasn't a straight to Netflix thing.
Oh, fair enough.
I think there is a film called Underworld something that is about werewolves and could trick you into thinking it's an Underworld film, but isn't.
I'm sure that the one that's current. Anyway,
I mean, it might be on Netflix, but it wasn't on Netflix. The very last one was.
It might be just because it didn't make it to Korea then.
Underworld Blood Wars.
Yeah, that's
in
the one
2016.
Yeah, see, I would have been like
Kate Beckinsale came back for it.
Yeah, in Korea at the time. So, and then the last Resident Evil movie came out 2018.
At least the live action movies of this series. There's obviously the animated movies as well. That in the canon of the games.
Husband and wife team have moved on to Monster Hunter now. So,
another Capcom franchise.
Another Capcom franchise.
So, what gets me with this? I mean, the story's actually pretty fine. But Resident Evil has a pretty decent storyline for the first Resident Evil game. You could adapt it to film quite well. A manor on top of a secret lab where an elite team of police go to try and figure out something that's gone wrong, and they get stuck in there and have to fight away and survive. One of them is betrayed by, like, and that's the weird thing. Like, this film hits similar beats, but
yeah,
like,
I mean, it's obvious. It's obviously based on, but in the sense of a manor that's built on top of a secret lab, and something's gone wrong, and an elite group of police or something.
There's a feel of like we kind of adapted it while ignoring all of it. Like, we took the skeleton and made it something. And I think Resident Evil is something that could be adapted well, faithfully. There's a lot of video games that I don't think you can faithfully adapt well. Like, we're going to be coming up and we're going to be doing this next week. We're doing Super Mario Bros. Right?
Yeah.
I don't think you can really legitimately, and it's going to be interesting to see what we do with the animated film, because animation is probably where you could do something with that. But I don't think you can actually legitimately do a live action adaptation faithfully of Super Mario. Like, there just isn't anything there to really
not easily
craft a live action film based off of. But
no, I think
Resident Evil as a game has it all. And it's just weird that there is that weirdness of like, why did you skew so similar but go so different? Like,
well, I think the thing was that at the time, obviously, as we've just mentioned, you had the Blade films.
Yeah.
And I think,
but here we're talking aesthetics now, though.
Oh yeah, I know, but I mean, the thing is, like, straight horror also wasn't necessarily at the time that big. But like horror,
you could tell the Resident Evil story in the aesthetics of this movie fine. Like, you could. It's this weird kind of sideways. No, we're not going to use any other characters, and I know they introduced some other characters in later films.
You see, I wonder whether the characters were a deliberate thing, like the choice of, like, because obviously I don't know what the deal was with Capcom. It could have been that Capcom just said, "Please don't use the characters." Like,
yeah, maybe.
And then obviously it did. I mean, it did really well. Like, the first one actually did good money, and good enough to then spur on like sequel after sequel.
We got a film of the other big Silent Hill movie in the same kind of era. The other big horror franchise in the same era of the Silent Hill movie, which is also we're not looking at Silent Hill during this series. Maybe if we do a second series, but Silent Hill is good. The Silent Hill film is very good.
I think the thing is that, like, as I was saying though, I think that, like, because there was a drop, from what I can remember, in that era of mainstream horror films, and obviously Blade had done quite well, and Blade had shown that you could have a darker action film. And therefore Resident Evil chose to go down that route, which I can perfectly understand. That then left the door open for Silent Hill to actually go, no, we're going to go for a horror film, like, and it is a much closer. Supernatural, obviously, but it's a much closer take on it.
The scene I most remembered from this, the thing that stuck in my head more than anything, like, I realised I'd forgotten most of the film, to be fair, and part of that is it's a little dull.
I get you.
It's just it's a whole lot of okay. Good cast, surprisingly strong cast.
Actually, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, yes, she's not playing a canon in-game character, but I think actually the character that Mila Jovovich plays it suits that style of horror, and it suits the events that were unfolding. And to be honest, even in the sequels, though the sequels totally lose track.
I've never seen any Resident Evil film past this one.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I might have seen 2.
She,
which is interestingly, this film has no interest in ending, like in giving you a satisfying close. It's just like sequel time.
We see. I think the thing was that obviously they knew, that they were at that point 3 mainline Resident Evils, I think, at the time of this.
Maybe more.
4 hadn't come out yet.
Code Veronica had, though.
I think Code Veronica had.
And Code Veronica is a mainline.
It is, but by mainline I meant numbered.
Yeah, but Code Veronica was... It's weird, like, it was the 4th Resident Evil game. It was in that main. Also, the one that you struggled to pick up anywhere these days is the weird thing. Yes. Like, in theory, hopefully, Code Veronica might be their next remake.
I think it's 4.
It is 4, I think you're right. And we just...
I think it's 4, but...
Do we need a remake of 4?
I think it's realistically only 4, because obviously with them releasing... We'll talk about this a bit more later on. With them releasing Resident Evil Village last week, as of recording and airing of this, Village is very much similar. I think it's potentially even set in the same area geographically, or fairly close. Because I know it's got some characters from 4 in it. From what
I remember playing through Resident Evil 4 at the same time as friend of the show, Ryan Kennedy. And obviously the lead character of Resident Evil 4 is Leon Kennedy. And one of the bad guys in Resident Evil 4 spends a lot of time going, "Aha, Mr. Kennedy." And I remember always used to freak Ryan out as he was playing it. But
it's
I was about to say my most memorable thing from the film wasn't I that I'd remembered all these years later. Because again, the last time I probably saw this was around probably when it came out.
I think about 10 years ago for me.
Yeah, it might have been sooner, but I'd certainly say it was in the 2000 to 2010 period would be the last time I saw this film. And it's the lasers.
Yeah, well, I think everyone remembers that because it was very cool.
It was.
Obviously,
it still is.
At the time, to pull that off was actually still quite an incredible feat of CGI. Because, like, as the monster later on in the film shows, like, CGI actually was still in its believable infancy. It had been around for quite some time. James Cameron successfully used it, of course, in The Abyss.
Yeah, he did some good work with it here.
1988, I think. Which was 14 years prior to that.
This is this is Paul W.S. Anderson as director.
Yeah. Obviously, Star Wars Episode 1 had come out 3 years before this, but that would have had a significantly larger budget. And
also there's still a fair amount of puppetry in Episode 1. Episode 2 is where he doubled down on the CG.
But I mean, it had loads of CG backgrounds, but obviously significantly larger budget, and it had Industrial Light and Magic, like the full might of Industrial Light and Magic going for it. So
this is a fun escape from the zombies film.
Yeah,
there's interesting things with the AI. The AI, I think, is a smart addition. I recently saw an X-Files episode about an AI that went rogue and killed people, and it reminded me of that a bit.
Well, I mean, not a dissimilar era in time.
Yeah.
So it's no, I mean, I have quite fond memories of this film because I saw it at the cinema. Sorry, it was one of the. It was at the time when what's now View Cinemas in the United Kingdom were Warner Village Cinemas.
Man. Loved Warner Cinemas.
Yeah, and my preferred cinema chain in the United Kingdom.
They would usually have statues of like Looney Tunes and things around.
Yeah.
I also miss the Warner shop.
Yeah,
that thing was amazing.
Same. But one of the cool things that they did, quite literally, with horror films was they turned the air conditioning down so that it was ever so slightly uncomfortable. But just slightly too cold. And then, of course, it was in the era where the next big leap in surround sound and good speaker technology came in as well. And of course, all these Warner Village cinemas, one in particular that I went to, were newly installed and everything like that. So they had peak technology for the time. So that really bassy soundtrack kicked in, and it worked fantastically, and everyone was on edge because of how cold it was, and a really good atmosphere had been created. But it was, I think, unfortunately, that this is the thing that I remember the most about the film. Obviously, you remember the most the lasers. The thing I remember the most about it was that during one of the tense sequences, the sound suddenly dropped, and it was deadly quiet. Deliberately as part of the film itself, like, and a young couple thought that they could get away with a bit of mischief up on the yes, and so a young lady enjoyed herself, shall we say. There was a scream of not terror from the back seat. But yeah, like, unfortunate that that's my main memory of it, but actually the cinema experience overall was fantastic. Because, as I said, that, like, it was the right film for the right time. It was aesthetically, whether that's visually or just the physicality of it.
Showing your age as an old man, I would have been too young to see this in the cinema, most likely.
How old would you have been?
What, 2002? 89.
You would have been 89 years old. Yeah.
No, I was just working out how... I would have been, what?
13-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, so too young. I
would have seen this on DVD when it came out on DVD.
I was 19 or 20. So I was exactly the audience age that they were looking for, realistically. And although I wasn't necessarily a Resident Evil fan of the games, because I was quite late into gaming, really, like, properly. So Resident Evil 1 and 2 in particular did pass me by.
So, obviously, still magazine, Games Master.
Yeah.
I remember when Resident Evil came out, getting a copy. I was a buyer of Games Master at the time. I played video games that and my granddad would always, Thursday, he'd pick me up from school and we'd always go to the newsagents. He'd get me a magazine and himself a packet of herbal tablets. And I can remember the cover of the episode of Games Master that either have a preview of a review of Resident Evil, and it's that iconic image of the first zombie you see in the game looking back, and like that magazine cover is just seared into my mind because it was horrifying, and it's just there in the newsagents on the front cover of that month's issue of Game Master, and it's like
no, it was good. As I say, I never really got into them. I think it was one of those things that, like, it's like early Metal Gears.
Well, the first
I missed them.
I don't think I ever really. I got into them with Resident Evil Remake. I dabbled in the PS1 games, but the control scheme was just, the tank controls were just never for me.
I think I played them like around at a friend's house, like the first one, and the tank controls.
I can remember playing a couple of the light gun games as well that came out on PlayStation 1.
Yeah,
Survivor.
I think to be honest, that's why Resident Evil 4 did so well.
Yeah,
because it was that proper, like, it was that proper modernization of the tank controls. Like, so it wasn't just tank control.
Yeah,
it was still heavy. Like, Resident Evil, I think, should be heavy-ish.
Yeah.
To create that level of horror, like, you shouldn't be playing the most agile of characters or anything like that. But I think that's why it's possibly still the favorite and definitely the highest scoring of the Resident Evil games. But But no, I think that like, so for me, it was the film. The film did what it wanted. I wanted it to do. I think.
Yeah.
And I think
potentially being overly harsh on it.
No, well, I mean, the thing is that like, it is a film of its time, and I was the perfect audience for the time because I was someone who was aware of Resident Evil. I was the right age, but I was, in theory, part of the mainstream because I hadn't played Resident Evil. I was just aware of it. So the thing is, if they were getting my cinema money, then that's good. And I enjoyed it, and I went and told people that I enjoyed it, and so on and so on and so on. I'm one of the people to blame for sequels, essentially.
Yeah.
But it is a film of its time, and I think that like the early 2000s, for various reasons, which we have touched upon in this episode and in other episodes of things we've done, because it was a technological renaissance at the time, with things like CGI being just at that point that lower budget films now could actually afford to have a go at it.
Yeah.
It looks dated now, but at the time it looked incredible.
I think it still holds up relatively well, to be fair.
It holds up. I mean, the body slicing in particular is fantastic. Like that still actually is really pretty decent, and smartly done so that they're not wasting too much time on seeing the bits and pieces that you like. It's not like when they have shots of them on the ground that you suddenly see all these lumps of meat and what have you. They know where to use practical and they know when to use CGI. And it obviously the weakest bit really is the monster at the end, which is forgivable for its time. I think that's all it really is, that like it's forgivable for its time.
So Matt, are video game movies good? Actually,
I'm gonna say take it with a pinch of salt because it has aged, but actually, yes, video game movies are good.
Also, again, going to say, actually, yeah.
I think in 20 years' time, because obviously it's nearly 20 years old, this film, which is like, I think what we reviewed last week, Mortal Kombat 21, will probably age better than Resident Evil has aged.
But we could just be viewing that like the aging may partly be because it is a snapshot of a very particular time that we're aware, like like that era of films is potentially particular for us, if you get me. Like
they're
formative, so I think sometimes formative films feel more of their time than a film you just watched once.
I get you.
But that would be a thought for a trainer thought maybe one day.
I think it might be. It might be.
Favourite survival horror game? No, survival horror game.
Oh, now you see you're making it a touch harder now.
Well, Resident Evil is a survival horror series. I have mine.
You start, because I can't quite remember the name of it.
Mine is going to be a hot take. And it is Resident Evil 5.
I know why, but you can tell our viewers.
So, Resident Evil 5 is not necessarily a good game if you play it single player. However, it is one of the best co-op experiences I think ever designed. Like, and specifically coach co-op. I don't know how online multiplayer would be, but as
Did you say coach? Did you say coach co-op?
I might have done. Couch
co-op. As in, like, playing on a bus?
Together. I mean, it's doable. But as a couch co-op game, like, sitting next to your friend with a pad, playing through Resident Evil 5 is a very fun experience. And if you're someone who doesn't like Resident Evil 5, I understand it, but I would say it is completely worth giving it a go that way. Because I think that is how I think... Probably for worse, that was how it was designed to be played. and it's just how not many people ever played it, which is understandable. And a food for thought as well. If you watch Resident Evil and you're like, oh man, I wish I had an adaptation that was of these films that are closer to the games. Like, I wish these films were... I would say, try and read S.D. Perry's Resident Evil adaptations. They're novels, and they're very good. I only ever read the first one, but the first one is an adaptation of the first game, and it is excellent. And I've heard her sequels are as well. Or his? S.D. Perry? There, yeah.
Play it safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Difficult one for me, because I've never really played a lot of horror games. Well, no. I've played a fair amount of horror games, but they're not necessarily my thing. So I've never got that far through them. But the one that sort of sticks out in my mind, because it was a little bit revolutionary at the time, was Fear.
Oh, Fear was good.
The 2005 game.
Yeah, Fear was very good. Fear was scary, man.
Fear was a good horror game. It had decent enough graphics for the time.
I mean, it's not survival horror; it's a first-person shooter. But I'll let you get away with it.
But it was a horror.
Fear is. Fear. I remember Fear being bone-chillingly scary when it wanted to be.
Yeah, real good. Like,
yeah, it's a great shooter as well.
It was a good shooter.
I wonder if that's playable on anything today.
I don't know.
Probably Xbox.
Possibly.
Everything's playable on Xbox.
True. It was one of the first games of that generation really to take like full advantage of atmosphere.
Yeah, lighting
as well. Lighting in particular, because like it was, the PlayStation 3 generation was something where there was a decent leap in graphical fidelity and therefore lighting as well, which was actually something I remember reading the review of Silent Hill 2 when it came out on the PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
That lighting was something that suffered with Silent Hill 2. Now, Silent Hill 1 was so scary because PlayStation 1, the graphics essentially were so bad that they could make it feel darker and scarier because you couldn't see that far. With PlayStation 2, the graphics improved, and it was actually detrimental to the overall fear of the game. But obviously because the graphics had improved, but things like lighting and ambient effects and
Fear would have been early PS3, right?
It was early PS3, yeah.
/ 360.
Originally a PC game and then was ported to the two consoles. Now, one of my favourite horror pieces of a game, and it was the thing that sort of made me want either a horror spin-off or for that team to go and make a horror game, was from Gears of War 2. I think it's through an asylum, an abandoned asylum or something like that. And it's chilling. Like, it's because obviously Gears of War is essentially just Space Invaders from a third-person perspective, where there's just endless runs of like the same grunts, and you just chainsaw them down or shoot the hell out of them, and they have this a basic story to pull you through. And
I've heard 5 is very good.
I mean, obviously they've got better over time, in particular after they've changed from being one team to a different team, and Cliff Bleszinski's left and what have you. But the highlight for me of Gears of War 2, which actually is a significantly better game than Gears of War 1, was that section. And because it slowed everything down. It was a breather from the intense action, but it didn't allow you to be calm because you were suddenly scared. And I thought actually that was probably the best piece of gaming that I've ever had from that sort of game, from anything that Cliffy B's ever done, from all of that style of gaming. It was superb, absolutely superb. So I would have loved to have seen a horror game either set in the Gears of War universe or from the team that worked on it at the time, because it would have just been really interesting. So, well, yeah.
On that note, we shall join you again next week for some mushroom hopping plumbing.
Yes, and if all things go to plan, it might look a little bit different next week as well.
You might be in for a special episode.
It might
and
be
we might have, to celebrate the theme of Mario, we might have moustaches instead of beards.
Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks. It's a promise.
Yeah, we'll be recording this on my wedding anniversary, so we'll see how my wife deals with the idea of me having a moustache and no beard. So, but more on that next week. So have a good time, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.